Hello and welcome to Religion and Life. I'm your host, Ozzie Ostwald. The life of a parish priest is marked by inspiration, service, devotion, and perhaps most of all, challenges. My guest today, a lifelong Appalachian and Episcopalian, has served as parish priest in the foothills and mountains of North Carolina, as well as holding an administrative post as canon of the ordinary. While the Reverend Dr. Scott Oxford is retired from active ministry, he is by no means inactive. Currently, he is writing and publishing a collection of stories and histories that in many ways continue his ministry in a creative way. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today to talk about your most interesting life and career and what you're doing today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so eighth generation Appalachian, is that correct?
Yeah.
So
both sides of my maternal and paternal ancestors came into the Catawba Valley in the mountains back in the 1750s. And we're just sort of hard rollers and machinists over time, blacksmiths, and
But also a lifelong member of the Episcopal Church.
Yeah, it's interesting. The first member of the Oxford family who came here, we traced his roots to a parish in Northern Virginia before they came here, his baptism record. Mm-hmm. And there were the Episcopal Church wasn't formed here until much later, but they eventually found their way back to our roots.
Yeah. So, I guess the Appalachian region is a mosaic of religious traditions, a lot of them English in origin, but we don't normally think about the Episcopal Church as defining Appalachia. Yeah. I'm just wondering, is it different being an Episcopal parish in an Appalachian region, or what's it like to be among all those Baptists?
Well, that's a good question. It's varied. It depends. But it's interesting here in the mountains, particularly here in the southern Appalachians. There's an old story, adage, tongue-in-cheek, that says about the mission field, that the Baptists came to the mission field on foot, the Methodists came on horseback, the Presbyterians in carriages, and the Episcopalians waited for the Pullman car, the railroad. Now, that is certainly not the case here. We predated some of the earlier churches. The first missionary who came into the mountains arrived in 1786, and it's been very much a small group, very mission-minded, and forming congregations in some of the most rugged areas of the mountains. So very atypical of what we might think of Episcopal churches.
Yeah, but I guess the Episcopal tradition is not an evangelical tradition, so while there is an emphasis on missions, there's not the emphasis on growth so much, I suppose.
That's true. We've always been a small denomination, and focusing on the local community, but outreach to the community as well. And I think Valley Crucis is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Valley Crucis. Okay. You spent some time there, so I want to come back to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But just a little more of your biography here. You were an ASU grad.
Correct. Graduated with a degree in history and minor in psychology and secondary education.
When was that?
1980.
So have things changed a little bit in Boone since then?
Yeah.
I came in 1988.
Oh, okay. Well, similar, yeah.
I've seen a lot of change.
Tremendous amount of change. The region is quite. Yeah. And that's true in all of the mountain communities.
So after you left ASU, you went to Divinity School.
Correct, at the University of South Sewanee. It was a 3-year Master of Divinity program and was ordained in 1987.
And then went on to Drew for your doctorate.
I did that later. I did that in course. They had a great program based here in the state, and we were all full-time in ministry. So we were able to integrate the teachings and learnings into our everyday work.
I think that degree in particular, seminaries and divinity schools really want you to be in ministry when you're doing that, because you can then focus on, I guess, particular issues, problems, or challenges.
And relate everything to the immediate reality of
Did you have a particular focus when you were doing that doctoral degree?
I did. It was on spiritual formation, spiritual development, and I used. I was at Valley Crucis when I worked on the dissertation, and it was study, academic, but also practical applications. We had to develop a program there and integrate the history of the place and spiritual biographies of all the people, and then use some of the great writers of the day to influence how we grow and mature in the faith.
You wrote a dissertation on that while you. Well, since you mentioned Valley Crucis, I've got a couple of photographs that might want to look at here.
Oh goodness!
This is just the beautiful chapel, the Church of the Holy Cross in Valley Crucis. And how long were you there?
I was there for just under 7 years.
Yeah. So one of the things that strikes me, and of course I haven't been in a multitude of Episcopal churches, but I've been around. They're all beautiful.
They really,
Is there something in the Episcopal ethos that tries to incorporate some kind of aesthetic into church architecture?
Yes, and part of that comes from Holy Scripture, but it also comes from early church history that we put emphasis on the house of God, and we adorn the house of God not with gaudy things, hopefully, but with to worship in the beauty of holiness.
Yeah, well, it certainly captured that aesthetic here. What's the date of this church? Do you remember?
Yes, that particular sanctuary was built in 1925.
Okay.
But there has been a worshiping community there and in the valley since 1842.
So is that St. John's?
No, St. John's came after. It was built as one of the mission churches in the late 1850s.
Okay, so I think I have a picture of that as well. We can go to that next photograph. Yeah, so it's not the best picture, but there you can see the kind of beautiful white church in that gorgeous setting.
Yeah, that's kind of a Carpenter Gothic. Particularly, you can see it. You can't see it with this, but in the windows and in the structure of the church, the altar is always at the front of the church, and then the congregation faces but the altar is central because what happens there is the primary focus of our worship, which is the Holy Eucharist and the sacrifice and the blessing of resurrection for all of us. That's not a lot of emphasis or as much emphasis on the sermon,
right?
But the more on what was done for us.
Yeah. That's what has struck me about Episcopal worship, which is different from what I grew up with in evangelical traditions, where the sermon was the main thing.
Right.
Here, the sermons are great. I think I've enjoyed all the Episcopal sermons I've ever heard, but it's the Eucharist.
It is, right. The Lord's Supper, Holy Communion, that's been from the earliest centuries of the church. The Lord's Supper on the Lord's Day. The agape meal was another one that was how it was defined early, where people would bring the food and gather it, and it would be blessed along with the symbolic the bread and wine, and then there would be an agape, a love feast of sharing the gifts of all those present.
It was interesting to me that during COVID, churches had to deal with the challenges of meeting in person or not meeting in person, sanitary practices around the Eucharist. There were some changes in the Episcopal practices, I believe, in response to COVID.
Yeah. There were some, and some different churches did different things. Just like with the way we do worship normally, there were some variations. Some unique aspects of that, but it did change the approach to how we do things. We're getting back to the norm, but it's taken some time. It was quite an experience, and it was a real challenge with clergy in terms of completely different way of worshiping and relating, which it's tough to do. We're so much focused on the community and those gathered. It's difficult to do that kind of disembodied distance.
Right.
It's a very different experience.
Yeah, I've got a photo of the interior of this church, I believe. If we could look at that, because here we go. That's looking at the back, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, but there's that central aisle. So this would be our perspective here would be from the altar itself.
Correct, yeah. And this is an interesting little addition. You see the piece of furniture in the back with the doors open like a cupboard? That was especially designed and presented to Holy Cross Parish by all of the monastic communities in the Episcopal Church back in the early 1960s to commemorate one of the first deacons and pastors there in Valley Crucis by the name of William West Skiles, who the bishop formed a community, a monastic community, before it became the norm in the church and got a lot of pushback. But he took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience and was the first in Valley Crucis, North Carolina, in these hills. He was the first ordained person to take those holy vows, monastic vows, since the English Reformation in the 1500s.
That's really interesting. And I know in America in general, monasticism is not as big a tradition in churches like the Roman Catholic Church or the Episcopal Church as it is in Europe. So here we have that historical connection. So was the monastic community here in Valley Crucis?
Yes. All of the early, there was actually a divinity school here along with that. It only functioned for maybe 3 years, but they had a total of maybe 20 students over those 3-year period. But because of the institution of the monasticism and a few other teachings that Bishop Ives wanted to introduce in the 1840s, it ran up against a brick wall of Protestantism, anti-popish teachings, that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Even though people had no idea what a pope or a was, they were against it. Right.
Yeah, right. That's right.
There was
I don't know what it is, but I'm against it. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
There was a local historian in Burke County who said that that all of the people in Burke County, no matter what religious expression, they were all Protestants. They just protested anything and everything that came along. Yeah, right.
Good. I've got one final picture here from Valley Crucis. I think it's of the conference center.
Yeah.
And that's adjacent to the Church of the Holy Cross and still functions. Everything from religious conferences, university uses it occasionally. The elementary school met there when Hurricane Helene destroyed their buildings.
That's true. That's true. And the students just left to move into the new school building there in Valley Crucis. But it has been one of mission and service in the community. There was, at one time, it was a boy and a girls school back in the early part of the last century. A girls school from the 1920s through the 1940s with phenomenal teaching. We've come across there's the syllabus information, Latin, Greek. We have a photograph in the 1930s where the girls put on a production of the Mikado. They made all of their costumes, sang the parts, and performed that opera. The exciting thing about it is someone once said, the hills remember everything. I mean, everything that's been said, sung, experienced lingers, and it's held in the hills. And I was thinking about that in the early monastic group. They would sing in Latin, and they would sing chants of the Psalms as they were going from one place to the other. So that mingled with these young girls singing the Mikado is part of this contribution to what surrounds us. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and the conference center itself, earlier you mentioned that the Episcopal Church tries to focus on the community and outreach to the community. And this is a perfect example of how this center has embraced university groups, religious groups, other religious groups, retreat groups, the Valley Crucis community, and so forth.
True, and not just Episcopalians, but there are other denominations who come here to experience the sacred space here in the mountains for their own growth and reflection.
Wow. So you've been a parish priest in different locations, all in mostly Western North Carolina.
All of them,
All in Western.
And the diocese, we're the 28 westernmost counties of the state.
And you were also an administrator
Yeah.
in the diocese?
Yes.
Okay. So this is maybe an unfair question, but which is more challenging? Administrating, or of course, I know as a priest, you're also an administrator, and
Yeah. No, hands down, administration is the biggest challenge.
Really,
it is for me personally, because it's I was called to be a parish priest. This was a wonderful opportunity, but I was pastorally present to folks as an administrator with the bishop's office, but it was a different community every week, and there was no ongoing presence. And I greatly missed that. So that's why I decided to get back into parish ministry, because of the connection with people and being with people on their very best and worst days of their life, and baptizing their children, and performing being with them when they're sick and dying, and the burials, and just the everyday life with
that
people.
just sounds like an impossible task almost. But apparently, if that was your calling, and sometimes you have to do things to clarify vocation, I think, do other
Exactly.
things.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. There's a great process in the Episcopal Church for that discernment of vocation, and it is very challenging. Some situations and people more than others. Some incidents that occur, big conflicts in the national church that are played out locally, that you've got to stand in the breach, and it's not always an easy place to be, but again, focusing on the gospel and letting the love of the gospel dictate how we approach big issues as well as daily relationships, and all of the work of care and love in the community, particularly the least, reaching out and helping out folks who are in dire straits. There's nothing better than that. Yeah, it's exhausting, but golly, Ned, I miss it.
And you've been how long have you been retired?
I retired in 2017.
Okay,
after 30 years.
And even when you were in active ministry, you were a writer.
Yes.
And now that you're retired, you're pursuing that a little more seriously. You sent me a story called Remembering Private First Class Simpson. It was very touching. I think this was published in Our State magazine.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's, when you wrote that story, and you may want to talk about it a little bit, but that was part of a focus that you followed or had that focused on servicemen and women and their stories. And you've written many of these stories now.
And the story is what connects us all. It's what stitches us and weaves us together as a human species. And sharing and hearing those stories, my parents and extended family, big storytellers, all the mountain folks, that's what we did when we get together every chance we could. And the stories that I heard shared with me, both before and during my ordained years, were the ones that stuck with me. And just someone once said, Scott, you're a story catcher. They just kind of cling to me. And I want to put them in a bigger context. So some of these folks, they're just not around anymore, but their lives, their stories are unique and need to be remembered. So one collection that I have that I'm seeking publishing on are of veterans and different unique stories of veterans, hidden stories, hidden circumstances, but also to raise up the humanity of folks that I don't want them to be forgotten.
Right.
And then the other are stories of people that I have served and worked with, mostly mountain folks, and profound, deep truth, faith, commitment, love that they have to be remembered.
Right. Well, that's a wonderful way to put it. I was taken by your comment that stories are the way we create bonds. It helps us to create community. And that's a lot of what religion does too. So stories are important.
Exactly.
In religion. Are you concerned at all with the contemporary setting that we've lost the ability to share stories, that we don't have much of an oral tradition anymore, that maybe social media maybe has changed the way we share stories? Do you see anything?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the opportunities are not there. And it's face-to-face conversation or groups of people, look them in the eye and hear their stories and see the emotions on their face and how they've, you have to do that to feel connected. And also, I think we have a very poor institutional memory, even within the church. We have a poor sense of memory in general to connect the past with the present, and that we keep wanting to recreate the wheel and think we're doing it better. And yes, it makes it much more difficult to keep the story alive, and that's one way to do that is to tell the tales of those who've gone before us, and we're standing on their shoulders.
Right.
None of us got here out of the blue.
Yeah. In remembering Private First Class Simpson, you tell the story about the Bobby who was killed in action, and there was one scene where the family years later were still setting a place at the table. Yeah, comment on that.
Oh, it just cuts your heart to think about that. But we were, I was with my dad. He was a classmate of my father's, and Bobby was killed in Iwo Jima, which was a horrific battle. But we gathered one Christmas, my dad and I, and started talking about him and looked up his brothers. He had a brother still living. This was back in '97, so we got his phone number, called, told him he knew my dad, and vice versa. So that Bobby still was very much alive here in conversations, and there was a silence. And Frank said, well, we've just come back from our annual Christmas family gathering, about 30 people, and he said, this was in '97, he said, we also had our toast to the empty chair. He said, we have set a place for him every Christmas since 1945.
That's 50 years later.
Yeah, but that's a way of remembering and staying connected and teaching future generations that. On Ken Burns, just to jump quickly to the American Revolution is on now, and he made a comment in one interview. He said the reason we get so fired up about war and it seems to inflate us so much is because we have not remembered, we have forgotten the horrific sacrifice and the damage and devastation to human beings and the obliteration of human lives that have gone before us. And to keep the memory alive is one of the best ways to preserve and continue some sense of peace and collaboration.
Yeah, that's really profound. So, and in that story, you say that to remember is to bring a person into membership.
Yeah, bring them back into just like to dismember means to take things apart, to remember, to put them back together, right.
And it occurred to me, or it struck me with that description in that story, that during the Eucharist, when you as priests says, do this in remembrance, that's remembering Christ or bringing Christ into membership of the community.
Yes, it is. That's the anamnesis is the remembering part, and we don't get the blessing until we have remembered and remembered why we're gathered and what was done for us and what we're to do for one another. And the blessing comes after that to go forth and get that done. But yes, remembrance comes first. It's essential.
Okay, so we know the importance of story. We know the importance of community building and religion. Tell me about the creative process. You obviously find something fulfilling or with the creative process that helps to round out who you are. What happens when you're writing and you're telling these stories?
I remember the person. I'll go into a reflection about when I heard the story or elements of the story, and then it just kind of cooks. And sit it on the back of the stove and it begins to cook. And part of that will bring forth maybe a poem or maybe a hymn or maybe another analogy that will help to amplify or to give context to the story. or other just images. The one image I used with Bobby that was so important, that's so starkly different, was he was killed in Iwo Jima, which was a volcanic ash island with a dead volcano, and it was filthy, horrible, smelled like sulfur.
Yeah.
And to have that where he was, his temporary burial was there, along with the other 6,821 Marines. Eventually was moved, and I found his grave site there in Morganton, where he grew up. And that's where I reflected on, this is where he belongs, not at the foot of a mountain named Suribachi, but at the foot of the Table Rock in Hawksbill, and back home with his family and all the things that make this life home. So, and that is just a flow that begins that I live into with any story.
Yeah. When the words finally come out on paper, is it easy or hard?
It's sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it just happens. Rarely, but a lot of but there's a lot of editing, going back and using other examples or refining. Yeah. But it's a wonderful process of accomplishment.
And you're writing some histories too. It's not just storytelling.
That's true. And even the stories the histories are the same.
Right. Bigger
stories. Some of them are my own personal sort of memoirish type stories of my development and growing up here in the mountains. And a good bit of it has to do with the people and some of the figures in history, like William West Skiles and others who were incredible individuals at a significant time that had been overlooked or forgotten because it's here in the mountains, and that's either been forgotten out of choice, out of ignorance, or in some cases out of arrogance.
Mm-hmm. So when will this collection of stories about veterans be available?
I am hoping that I'm still sending stories to an editor who's helping me recreate and rewrite some parts of it, structure and others.
Right.
But we're hoping within the next 4 months, 6 months, we're going to do something with that, and we're talking to some publishers, so we'll see.
Yeah.
See how that goes. Or do it we may end up self-publishing.
Yeah. And then will there be a second volume?
Maybe. I tell you, well, that's one of the things about remembering and remembering stories is that a certain story, event, a song, even an aroma, it'll start pinging other memories and other parts of my brain that I'd forgotten. So, oh my God, I got to remember this story about Guy Seacrest that I heard 50 years ago.
Well, Scott, you have lived a fascinating life, and what a wonderful career and ministry you've had. And now I'm happy that you have the time to reflect on these remembrances and to put them down and share them with a whole nother generation of people.
Well, thank you so much.
You're doing your part.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks for coming back to campus, and thank you for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for Religion and Life for this week. I hope you'll join us again next week on App TV as we continue to explore the relationship between society, culture, and religion. Until then, this is Ozzie Ostwald.